Hey guys, I'm AH Designs and welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's been a little while since we've done a work in progress vlog and I've recently finished my Riko Sakurauchi, I believe it's how her name's pronounced, cosplay from Love Live. I announced a while back that myself and Meguin Cosplay were working on a few different cosplay duos for the World Cosplay Summit in Japan for the multiple events we will be participating in during our time there as Team Canada. And we decided to do a set of Love Live idols because, I mean, Meguin cannot go to Japan without an idol cosplay. That would be a crime. I've recently finished my half of it and the patterns are now over with Meguin along with some of the other little notions and such, so she's working on hers now, and I thought I'd just take you along on the journey of working on this Riko cosplay. I'm really happy with the result and I'm really looking forward to showing you guys the entire process. So let's go check that out.
So something that I really enjoy doing when I make my own costumes is to pattern draft my own patterns from scratch. And this one was no different. And also, since Meguin and I were making these same cosplays, well, basically the same cosplays, it was nice that I was able to actually share and give these patterns to her later, so it gave her less work to do besides just a few sizing things, since we are two totally different people, so obviously nothing is going to fit exactly the same for the two of us. I don't always show this much of the process when it comes to pattern drafting in my videos, but this time around I decided maybe I should, especially because I have this neat little tulip shaped sleeve and I'm really happy with it, and it's a really fun pattern drafting method. All in all, the pattern drafting went really well and I only had a few mock-ups to do, so I am pretty happy with it. When it came to the skirts, one of the tools that came in absolutely clutch was a circle calculator. We decided to go with double circle skirts for each layer, and there are 4 skirts on this outfit. So there was quite a bit of circle math to do to make sure things fit our waist and to make sure that they were flouncy and the right lengths we wanted. So there was an awful lot of circle math to do for this, but circle math isn't that difficult. If you have a circle calculator, it really helps get those calculations and make everything nice and accurate and just the way you want. And luckily, again, these ones actually worked out really nicely for us and fit quite well in the end.
All right, so here is my finished mock-up. I've just tried it on. I forgot to get footage of me trying it on, but mostly because I don't have a good mirror. But there was a little bit of roundness over here that I was worried about when I was looking at this costume on the dress form. But also, dress forms do not have proper rib cages. Rib cages are round, and the rib cage on a dress form is very straight up and down. So on me, on an actual human, this fits really well. I have room to expand my lungs, essentially. There's a nice amount of wear ease. This costume doesn't need to be super skin tight because, of course, it's not a corset or anything like that. The big issues, honestly, were just up here. The neckline was just too tight. Now, there is some seam allowance on here, but it was way too tight. So it wasn't the seam allowance causing the issue. It needs to be down by quite a bit. And the sleeve is just... This is not the desired look. It needs to be way fuller and way rounder and also shorter because I've already cut it. But it's looking pretty good. I'm gonna go make those pattern adjustments and also adjust this particular one, remove this sleeve, fix this, and I can drape the collar, and then the patterns will be all done already.
I didn't have very many pattern adjustments to do this time around, but there were a few, so here's just a little sneak peek at how some of them might look. This being the neckline, which is a lot of eyeballing the curvature I'll need to change it to, and making sure that the shoulders all line up in the end.
All right, so I'm wearing my updated mock-up. So I've made a collar and I'm actually really happy with it. It looks really cute. It just kind of hits over the corners and I'll be able to put the tie right here. Obviously it's not pressed properly or anything, so it's just kind of sitting funny. I also will have to add a little hook and eye to the back of it since it is gonna have to separate from the back and I want it to all stay in place. But yeah, I actually really like the shape. It's sitting where it's supposed to. And then once I get that tie on here, it'll look really cute. So yeah, I think the mock-up stage is done. My patterns are good to go. Heck yeah. Also, the sleeve is so weird in muslin fabric because it's just kind of, well, like, it's very circular, but because it's stiff, it's just doing that. So hopefully it weighs down a bit better. But yeah, mock-up. Okay, so it's been a little while since I've checked in or even actually worked on anything related to my Riko cosplay. But I'm actually gonna get some sewing done because I've actually gone ahead and cut out almost all the pieces, all the upper half pieces. So other pieces are not cut, but like here's all my little cuts over here. So, you know, all my pattern pieces. I did get the sequins cut out. So I am actually getting around to actually like sewing some stuff now. So the first thing I'm gonna actually work on, because I wanna get the bodice done, I'm actually gonna work on some hems, which sounds weird because that's usually not the first step. But I do have these little ruffles that go up and down the front of the bodice in 2 different colors. And the sleeves, which are going to require marrow hems.
So a little fun trick you can do if you have a serger like this one is that you can actually tie your threads together and then pull them through the entire mechanism. This is so much easier than completely rethreading everything every single time and saves me so much time and energy when I'm using a serger and several different colors like I did with this project. And that was for both the inside and also for all the hems. So there was a lot of serging on this project.
So I have all my ruffle pieces all serged hemmed with the marrow hemmer, that nice clean narrow hem, and I've also done it to the sleeves as well. Now I was surprised on the sleeve because it actually lettuced a lot. I had a lettuce function set so it would kind of be wavy, but on this light pink it lettuced a lot more than I expected. But you know what? This is for a ruffly idol girl. So like when that's all gathered in and everything, cute little lettucey hem, it's gonna work anyway. She's a very ruffly character, so having extra volume at the bottom, it works. So now the next thing I have to work on, now that I have the ruffles also hemmed, is to get the front of the bodice done, because there is some detail down the center front. So to do that, I have my center front placket here, and I'm gonna have to ruffle the ruffles into place onto the center front piece. When I went and cut this piece also, because there is a stripe on this fabric, if you look carefully, you can see that down the very middle is one of the stripes, and that was very intentional. I did a lot of placement and pattern matching work to get that to work out. So very careful placement of the pattern piece and everything, but I got it, and I'm very, very happy with this little detail. So yeah, I guess now it's just a matter of getting into the center front piece before I start sewing the whole bodice together.
Now this center front placket is actually made of 2 layers with a lining layer and then all sewn together to make a very solid placket piece. And part of the reason there's 2 layers is because there's all of these pleats that go into it, and because it's a white thin fabric, I was really worried all you'd be able to see is all that pink fabric sitting in between. And we didn't want that. I wanted the stripes to show, not the pink fabric and pleats underneath. And the pleats went in really, really nicely. It took a little bit of time, a little finagling here and there, but they ended up going in really nice and evenly, and I couldn't be happier. Honestly, this part was one of my favorite parts. I really like details. It's really interesting to be doing details this early on in a costume. And I got to do some hand stitching too, which is really great. Just basting everything in place to make sure that center front is directly down the center of the garment and along all those lines that I so carefully pattern matched. Now I know this is a blouse and you'd think this is actually where it opens and closes, but I'm cheating a little bit, and as were the original garments. So this is just top stitched down into place, which is much easier, to be completely fair. There is also nothing quite as satisfying as pulling out pad stitching or diagonal basting. Now the lining and the main bodice went together basically the same exact way and went together quite smoothly. Typical princess seam sewing here. A curve to a curve, making a really nice fitted garment.
Okay, so it's most of the bodice finished and kind of over on the side right now. I'm gonna move on to making the waistband. The waistband gets interesting because I have a standard layer of fabric, and I also have this, my sequin layer. Now, luckily, these are really small sequins. They're really, really weak little sequins. They're sewn on well, but they're not very strong. I will not break a needle if I sew through one of these. If anything, it'll probably go through all the little holes around it, which is great. So I am gonna be able to sew normally. I wasn't able to cut this out with my good scissors because of course I'd be cutting into some plastic and I don't want to ruin my scissors on sequins. So the first thing I'm gonna have to do is actually attach all of these pieces to the fashion layer, which goes underneath, because otherwise this would be pretty see-through right on my waist, which isn't ideal. So I have to layer them on top of each other. So I'm gonna base them down, and then I'm actually gonna reduce the seam allowances on here because I don't want this, too much of this, because this is rough, this is gonna be annoying. I don't want too much of that. So I'm gonna stitch around the whole piece on each of them and just keep it down to snip it down a bit. Because sequins, they're fun to work with. So before I continue working on the waistband, I actually totally forgot that I forgot a step. So I actually have this trim right here that I'm gonna be putting onto the bodice seams. Right here, the princess seams on the front and on the back. That's just decorative. The characters happen to have it. It's actually not as thick as I remember it being, which is fantastic. This was bought off AliExpress. It's a pretty simple trim, nice and thin, so it will go on quite easily, which is nice. It won't be too bulky in the seams later. So I'm actually gonna pause on my progress involving the trim and go back to the waistbands because it doesn't smell great. I'm gonna go give it a little wash, a little dry, and just kind of get that smell out before I use it because I don't want this smell, this plasticky smell lingering for too long. I don't know if I can get it out, but it smells like it's just been in packaging for too long. So I'm gonna go give it a quick little hand wash and then get back to sewing.
So I mentioned pad stitching or diagonal basting earlier, and here's where I did a chunk of it. I did this for every single waistband piece, and there were quite a few because it is a fitted waistband. 2 in the front, 2 in the back, and all of them hand basted into place to make sure that that sparkly, sequiny layer didn't move around a whole bunch. Otherwise, this would be a real pain to sew with because both these fabrics do not like cooperating with the sewing machine very much. So this made them act like one piece together. And the seam allowances were cut down so I'd have less of that plasticky sequin in my seam allowances, so it would be a little bit easier to deal with later on. And I didn't have to do any other special treatment to these pieces, though I already did a lot. I could actually just sew them in like this because these sequins luckily do not break sewing machine needles as they're quite thin. This fabric was from AliExpress, so it wasn't exactly the thickest sequins in the world. Many of the sequins did fall off though, so I had to take some, remove them, put them back on, and replace them so I wouldn't have little gaps of missing sequins. Not something most people would notice, but it would have bothered me a whole lot. Now for the seam allowances, I did have to stitch them all down carefully to the interfacing layers so it wouldn't show on the other side, but this was because I couldn't actually press this fabric because it's covered in tiny little pieces of plastic. I didn't want melted yuckiness all over it, so I had to do it this way. Now, time for the bust trim. This was applied to all the princess seams, so on the back and on the very front, and went on by just top stitching on 2 sides of each seam. So this keeps them nice and stable as well, and won't keep them flopping around all over the place. I actually really like this trim, so I'm really glad we found one so similar to the original stage show versions of these costumes.
All right, so I now mostly have the bodice done for now. As you can see, it's a full piece. You know, you got the front and the back. So the front bodice and the lining pieces are done. I am gonna be getting that lovely little sparkly belt at the bottom. But first, there's a step I realize I'm going to have to take. This fabric is shifty and it's not the strongest. And this costume is going to be decently heavy. So I've decided I'm going to take some pieces of twill tape to reinforce the shoulders a little bit because all of that weight's going to be on these seams and I don't want them to be wavy on the final costume when I'm wearing it. So these pieces of twill tape are just going to help stabilize it, keep it in place, keep it for the seam from wanting to shift around, keeping it nice and straight like it was sewn. And it will just help keep the entire costume stronger since the fabric there is not the strongest. This isn't a necessary step all the time for shoulders, but because of just how light this fabric is, I'm wanting to reinforce it just a little bit.
Doesn't that look great? Now the seam is nice and strong, and the top stitching is kind of satisfying on the outside as well. Now let's finally get that waistband applied. It's time to put it on by matching up all the princess seams and side seams. This was a pretty straightforward seam, but it also had to be treated the same way as the seams for the little waistband, because guess what? More sequins. So all of that had to be hand stitched down as well with a tiny bit of pressing. There was a lot more handwork in this costume than one would expect just by looking at it straight on, to be completely honest. Sequins are a lot of work. And if you can't tell what these little pieces right here are, these are actually for the collar. Only one side is made of the regular fabric because I want it to look nice and clean and be a little stiffer on the outside. This was a standard installation and also has some understitching to keep it in place.
Okay, so off camera, I have gone and attached all the sequins on the neckline. I did it off camera mostly because I actually just forgot to film, to be completely honest. I really enjoyed it. I spent about 2 or 3 evenings just sitting down, hand sewing on some sequins. Like, I'm really happy with how that looks. It's looking really cute so far. I'm really happy with it. This color is a little redder than I had originally wanted, but it actually looks really good next to the other pieces that I just cut out. The skirts. So each skirt layer, and there are 4, are double circle skirts. So I have them all cut here. There's actually quite a lot of fabric. So what I've decided to do, and I talked to my Gwen about this, was the 2 top layers, which are this light pink and the organza layer, will be attached to the bodice as a dress, and the bottom 2 layers, which is this broadcloth and the satin, will act as a separate skirt completely. And that's because otherwise this waistband, which will all be gathered into this piece I've just made here, is going to be so bulky, so hard to sew through. So this way it makes it a little easier to construct and just a nicer garment in general. So they will be in 2 pieces because of all the layers that are gonna be on here. So now that I have all of these circles cut out, so each one is its own little circle skirt, and there's 2 each, I will be putting a seam into these guys, cutting in an extra seam after it's hung for a while, but each of these little skirts will be hung up on a hanger so that the bias can all stretch out. But basically I have all these little skirts kind of cut out. And I'll be getting to my mom's Cricut to get all the polka dots made very soon. So everything is going as planned, which is great.
So remember when I was saying everything was going really well? Well, this right here that you're seeing on screen right now is where it kind of all stopped going really well. But let me explain that really quick to you on what went wrong here.
So I haven't been sewing a lot recently. I've been really tired, so I just haven't had the energy after work. But in the times I have been sewing, I've been working on the skirts. So I do have the organza layer nicely marrow hemmed, which is so satisfying. But then I got to my upper layer, the top light pink layer, the one that goes right there. The plan was to put horsehair hem on these layers to make them really swishy, except for the organza, which is see-through. But there was a problem. The light pink fabric, I've been interfacing it this whole time that I've been using it. It is a really lightweight satin, not like the dark pink. The dark pink's a lot heavier, but the light pink is very almost charmeuse-like, not quite as silky smooth and stuff like that as a charmeuse would be, but it's very light and very drapey. I did go ahead and put the horsehair on, but it doesn't work. And I didn't know if it would, so I gave it a shot, but look at that. It's doing the thing you want. Like, you want a little ruffly effect. Like, that is why you put horsehair hem. But that ridge, do you see that little ridge it creates? No, that's not gonna work. Because otherwise this would have been so fun because it's all flouncy, but you just see ridge. We're restarting that layer. I've been really tired recently and that took a lot of time. Oh well, we live and we learn, and that is the cosplay process.
Now time to place some dots. We used my mom's Cricut to cut these out, and we decided to go with a size that was kind of in between the size of the anime and of the stage show. So they're not exactly like one or the other, they're kind of like combining both elements together. These just easily were pressed on, and then that very satisfying pull off every time. Oh, I loved doing this part. It was actually kind of satisfying.
Over here.
Now this top skirt actually has two different trims on it. So there's this one little trim that I kind of had to pleat into place, just a very simple little lace. Really, really cute, and I had to pleat it a little bit just so it would cooperate with the roundness of the double circle skirt. And on top of the little lace went this nice silver trim, which is really quite stiff, so it kind of made the skirt layer act like it had horsehair in it either way. Like, it was so stiff, it did the job really well. Time to put my machine to its highest stitch setting and get some gathered skirts done. I had to do this for every single one of the skirts, but I'm only going to show you one because this is a very lengthy process because it's double circle skirts, twice my waist size, and there were 4 layers of this. I got very familiar with doing gathered skirts through this project, and actually just skirts in general. Do I ever want to do a circle skirt again? I'm not sure.
I am currently hand sewing down the lining on the inside, which is all poplin. So I sewed it together before. Now that this area is like all sewn down, I have the skirts attached. I just need to sew on this lining and then put some finishings like hook and eyes, and this garment piece will be mostly finished besides like buttons and stuff. So I've decided to try it on now. The lining's all in, and besides some finishings, the bodice is done, and I'm kind of obsessed, honestly. I'm really happy with the fit. I can take a full breath in this. I have taken all of the lines out of here, the stitching out of here, and it's sitting nice and flat. The fit is sitting nicely. I don't have a finishing on the neckline yet, so that collar will be like pinned down. They're gonna be hook and eye together. But yeah, it's looking really good and it's comfortable, which is fantastic.
Now to properly actually put in horsehair hem on the satin that actually behaved really well with this horsehair, this plasticky horsehair hem. I put it in the very standard way. There was a little bit of messing around and easing into the circle shape, especially on the very top of the little facing kind of thing that we were doing here. But especially compared to that top skirt that went so horribly wrong, this went really well. It went in very clean and I'm really happy with it. And I'm glad I was able to actually use this technique in the end. No ridges, no nothing. This looks so much better. And after digging in my grandma's stash a little bit that she left me, I found the perfect zipper. A little bit more of pressing dots later, and the skirt was nearing completion with just a little zip and a zip. This was very satisfying to do, and the skirt turned out way better than that first top layer did. And I didn't show it, but there is also a bottom layer made with a broadcloth fabric, and that's what holds the final trims. And finally, the little detail, the buttons. I sew the button through every layer because I want it to act as one big thick layer so that they don't fall off and they're nice and strong, and makes the layers act as one cohesive piece. And actually, this was the last step of the entire costume.
Time I have put on all of Riko all together, and honestly I am loving this so much. I feel so fluffy, so pink. I feel like I could dance even though I can't dance, which is hilarious considering I am dressed as someone who dances, but I'm so happy. I am very excited to wear these in Japan with May Gwyn. I believe we're aiming for opening ceremonies with these dresses. I'm really, really proud of the result. I like the amount of detail, really happy with the fit as well. I might do a little bit more to the bangs of the wig to look a little bit more like Riko, do a little bit more styling, but I want to try out the whole thing before I decide anything. So I'll get Gwen's advice with that, and maybe I'll actually get her to help me style it, because I think it needs to be styled while in my head, because my proportions are a little bit different from an anime girl and from my wig head. It's actually very comfortable. We pair them with some Lolita shoes, so that also adds some extra comfort. They're stable, they're not going anywhere when I jump or anything. I finished the first cosplay we named for WCS! Yay! Thank you guys for coming on this little adventure with me. I really enjoyed making this. This is a costume I had a lot of fun working on. I'm very excited to wear it alongside Gwen cosplay when she finishes You, or Yo. I think it's pronounced You.